Since you are in the primary school, you have been taught one absolute undeniable fact about our planet. The Nile is the longest river in the world. But what if I told you that from an engineering and mapping perspective, that might be completely wrong? Hey guys, Dibyajyoti here from The Fast Engineer. Right now, there is an ongoing debate among scientists, cartographers, and hydrologists. On one side, traditional cartographers defending the Nile, on the other, modern scientists claiming the Amazon is actually the king, stretching over 6,992 kilometers. But to figure out who is right, we have to look past the geography books. We have to look at the physics of satellite mapping, the geometry of coastlines, and the ultimate engineering mystery. How do you actually measure a moving, living body of water? Let's solve this. Let's start with the reigning champion, the Nile. For centuries, its length has been recorded at approximately 6,650 kilometers. It flows north through 11 countries, eventually dumping into the Mediterranean Sea. But measuring a river is not like measuring a piece of string. You can't just lay a tape measure across a continent. To measure a river, you need to find two precise points. Point A, the absolute farthest source of the water, and point B, the exact mouth where it meets the ocean. Sounds simple, right? It's actually not. For a long time, many people assumed the Nile began at Lake Victoria. But hydrologically speaking, a lake is simply a reservoir fed by other rivers. To find the Nile's most distant source, surveyors had to trace the water even farther upstream through the Kagera River system. While several tributaries compete for the title, one widely cited candidate is the Ruvironza River in Burundi, often considered one of the Nile's remotest headstreams. From there, the water flows into the Ruvubu River, then into the Kagera River, which eventually empties into Lake Victoria. From the lake, the river continues northward as the White Nile before joining the Blue Nile in Sudan and ultimately reaching the Mediterranean Sea. Following this entire interconnected system is how researchers arrived at the Nile's accepted length of roughly 6,650 kilometers. Then we have the Amazon. Now nobody disputes that the Amazon is the biggest river. By volume, it's an absolute monster. It contains more water than the next 7 largest independent rivers combined. But for decades, its length was clocked in at around 6,400 kilometers. Close, but not quite enough. The Nile was still longer. But there is another reason this debate became so intense. For most of the 20th century, measuring a river this long was incredibly difficult. Scientists relied on paper maps, aerial surveys, and limited ground expeditions. Large portions of the Amazon basin were remote, dense, and difficult to access. As satellite technology improved, researchers could trace river channels with a level of precision that simply wasn't possible before. Suddenly, old measurements were being challenged by new data. And that's when the Amazon started attracting serious attention. But the Amazon holds geological secrets that make this debate even crazier. Did you know that millions of years ago, parts of the ancient Amazon drainage system flowed in the opposite direction toward the Pacific Ocean? Then the Andes Mountains began to rise as tectonic plates collided and pushed the Andes upward. They effectively created a massive continental barrier. The water had nowhere to go. Vast wetlands and inland seas formed across the continent until over millions of years, the drainage system was redirected eastward, carving the modern Amazon's path to the Atlantic Ocean. And if this isn't wild enough, in 2011, Brazilian researchers announced evidence of a second hidden water flow system deep beneath the Amazon. It's called the Rio Hamza. Flowing through porous rock nearly 4 kilometers below the surface, it stretches across much of South America and is roughly comparable in length to the Amazon itself. While it is not a river in the traditional sense, its immense scale reveals just how complex the Amazon basin really is. So when we debate which river is the true king, we are usually arguing about the water we can actually see on the surface. But here is where the science gets messy. In 2007, and backed by newer expeditions today, Brazilian scientists used advanced satellite tracking and physical ground teams to trace the Amazon source. They didn't just look for the main river, they went high up into the Andes Mountains in southern Peru to a snow-capped peak called Nevado Mismi. By calculating the path from this newly defined point A all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, they got a new number, 6,992 kilometers. If this data is correct, the Amazon beats the Nile by over 300 kilometers. So why isn't this debate settled? Why haven't the textbooks been rewritten? This is where the engineering comes in. Measuring rivers falls victim to a mathematical phenomena called coastline paradox. The coastline paradox states that the measured length of a complex curve, like a river or a coastline, depends entirely on the length of the ruler you use to measure it. If a satellite maps the river using a 1 kilometer grid, it's going to draw straight lines across the river's curves. But if a surveyor on the ground measures the exact same river, walking along every single tiny bend, twist and turn, the total length increases drastically. The smaller your unit of measurement, the longer the river gets. Mathematically, if you use an infinitely small ruler, the river's length approaches infinity. This is a huge problem for comparing the Nile and the Amazon. The Amazon is heavily meandering. It twists like a snake through the jungle. If different teams use different rulers' lengths or different satellite resolutions, the numbers will never match. But wait, the physics problem gets worse. Remember point B? The mouth of the river? Finding where a river ends should be obvious. It's where it hits the ocean. But the Amazon's mouth is massive. It's wider than the entire country of Belgium. And right in the middle of it sits Marajo Island, an island the size of Switzerland. Which way do you measure? Do you take the shortest path to the sea, or do you trace the longest possible tidal channel around the island? The Brazilian team that calculated the 6,992 kilometer length measured around the southern side of the island. Critics argue this is basically cheating, padding the stats by taking the longest possible detour. On top of that, the Amazon floods. During the wet season, it expands drastically, completely changing its shape and path. You are trying to measure a target that's constantly moving. So what's the real answer? From an engineering standpoint, stating a river's length down to the exact kilometer is a flawed concept. The variables are just too unstable. The US Geological Survey and the Encyclopedia Britannica still officially list the Nile as the longest. However, modern hydrologists are increasingly leaning toward the Amazon as high-resolution LiDAR and satellite data reveal more complex microcurves in the river system that older technology missed. It's a perfect example of how, in science and engineering, the answer to a seemingly simple question is entirely dependent on the tools you use to measure it. I want to know what you guys think based on the coastline paradox and the changing source points. Are you Team Nile or Team Amazon? Drop your vote in the comment section. If you want to see more engineering mysteries broken down, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep questioning the textbooks.